All right. Thank you all for joining us today for our second and final Microsoft Security Briefing session. We truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to engage with Revanti. Revanti is a Microsoft partner that has a team packed with expertise in all things Microsoft. The team at Revanti is ready to help organizations deliver a more collaborative, more productive, and more secure experience. A few housekeeping items today. This is a live event that is being recorded. We will be sharing the recordings with each of you. If you have any questions on any of the content presented today, feel free to enter them into the Q&A chat and our team will take action to help answer them. Our speakers for today, Lai and Yasai. These two gentlemen come loaded with a deep wealth of knowledge around Microsoft's tool sets and its impact on end users. And I am confident and I know you will walk away with more insights on security with Microsoft Suite of Tools by the time this session is over. All right, enough from me. Lai, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Shane, and welcome everyone to part 2 of our Microsoft Security Briefing webinar today. Once again, I'm excited for everyone to be here to be discussing about securing data and apps within with Microsoft Security Solutions and to address the evolving threat landscape that we see. So what are we here to talk about today? So for today, we're going to go through and recap webinar 1. We'll also go through and discuss and jump into the Zero Trust pillars, specifically around data and apps. We'll also discuss the Microsoft Security Solutions around data and apps. ESI will then walk through, once again, another demo walkthrough specifically for data and apps. And we'll end it with the final thoughts as well as a customer story case study. Discuss the what's next path to Zero Trust, and then finish it off with some Q&A. So just to recap from our previous webinar for those that were not able to join, what we discussed in that previous webinar was we first start off on the threat landscape and the evolving security threats. So we dove in and we discussed the different components within the current threat landscape. We discussed changes in the landscape, discussed the productivity and ease of use, shift to hybrid work, overlapping technologies, and lack of awareness. And in summary, really the key takeaway is that there are multiple factors that can lead to an increase in cybersecurity threat. And to really achieve a strong security foundation, organizations must really address all the different threats that may occur to really have that holistic approach to prevent those threats from happening with the environment, right? From there, what we then discussed was the different evolving security threats that we typically see within the environment itself. We went through as mentioned, the identity and endpoints component, and discuss all the different threats that come from those two pillars. We also discuss the cost of cybercrime in 2024, which equated to around $9 trillion globally, primarily due to ransomware, phishing attacks, as well as data breaches. And we also discussed in that previous webinar the estimated amount in 2028 to be about $14 trillion globally due to cybercrime, right? And so for today, we are going to jump into, once again, the pillars of Zero Trust. We're going to focus mainly on the data and apps component of Zero Trust. And just to do a quick summary and recap of what Zero Trust is Zero Trust is essentially a security model where no user, no device, or no application is inherently trusted, even if they are already inside the corporate network. The idea of zero trust is to, or the principles of zero trust is to verify explicitly, to use the least privileged access, and to always assume breach within the environment, right? And as mentioned, we discussed and I went through the identity and endpoints pillar. For today, we are going to dive into the data and apps pillar. Within the data pillar of zero trust, what we're looking to do and to show is essentially making sure that we can classify, label, and encrypt data and restrict access, once again, to that data to only those that need that data, right? To really enforce that principle of least privilege. Then we're going to jump into the apps pillar, and we're going to show and discuss about applying controls and technologies to protect existing apps within the organization, as well as to discover applications that users may be using that are unknown and unsanctioned within the application, also known as shadow IT. Really analyzing and discussing the different behaviors and abnormal behaviors and analytics around utilizing applications and identifying applications that are prevalently used but not sanctioned within the organization. In addition, we'll be covering the different Microsoft security solutions within the data and apps pillar. So within the data pillar, we're going to be jumping into the components of Microsoft Purview and all the capabilities that Purview has. We'll be discussing things like retention and deletion. We'll be showcasing data classification. There's also components of e-discovery and content search that we'll be discussing and kind of diving into. And also other components of data that's also important is insider risk management, where essentially that's protecting against potential threats within the organization, right? Such as massive data extraction or exfiltration within the organization due to users performing that activity, right? We'll also look into data loss prevention and how to prevent sensitive data from being leaked out to outside of the organization, right? And then moving over to the apps pillar, the Microsoft security solutions that we'll be looking into and discussing is Defender for Office, protecting against safe attachments and safe links. We'll be discussing about Defender for Cloud Apps and how to detect, as mentioned, unsanctioned applications and looking into discovering shadow IT. Discussing things such as entitlement management and also, the components of protecting the applications on desktop devices, mobile applications, and so forth. And just kind of summarizing all of this before we jump into the demo, we can't stress enough that in order to protect your organization, your users, and your data, a multi-layer security strategy is required. And as discussed and presented in the previous webinar, we went through the identity and endpoints component, protecting against threats within identity endpoints. For today, we're going to dive into data and apps and how to prevent and protect the potential security threats such as data breach, data exfiltration, unsanctioned apps, spear phishing, and so forth that may be existing within organizations that in order to protect them against those threats within the data and apps pillar. With that being said, I'd like to pass it over to Yasai to walk us through the demonstrations for data and apps. Yasai?
Thank you so much, Lai. And to those who are joining us first time, and welcome. And to those of us who are part of our first part one of our webinar series, welcome back. So we really appreciate you spending some time with us today as we really walk you through that zero trust journey and how to protect the different layers using the Microsoft set of solutions. And I broke down the different pillars, kind of talked to you about zero trust and the different pillars and how to protect those very important pillars of Zero Trust. And in my portion, I'm going to be covering and kind of walking you through some demo situations to really show you how we're applying the actual technology to protect that layer. So in our first section, we're going to be covering the data pillar. And as part of that, we're going to be showcasing some of the capabilities of Microsoft Purview. Purview comes with a lot of different solutions, which includes, data loss prevention, includes information protection. There's components of auto labeling, right? Using information protection auto labeling to automatically apply labels and classify your data. That's very, very, very important. I can't really stress enough how important it is. The first major point is knowing your data. That's really hard because going in and protecting data is great, but you have to know your data, know what you have before you can apply that protection. And then from there, once you protect it, then you prevent data loss by preventing that data from leaving the organization. And then you apply the governance capability by applying retention and different policies to retain that data using different, and then use e-discovery for actually searching through and governing that data. Now, my demos here will be first covering like the user situation. In this case, we have our user Ellen, who's trying to apply sensitivity labels. So we want to really articulate how the end user can actually apply those labels. What do they see? What do they visualize? And what it really means when they're applying the labels and how that's helping you protect the organization. Next, we'll also see a same user who tries to, upload a file with a specific highly confidential label to say a box.cam account. And what happens when they attempt to do that? So we'll see it. And obviously I'll be kind of talking through that as the demo's going on. I'll also be showing you how endpoint DLP can also apply, where it will, if you try to attempt to say print a highly confidential file, what happens with endpoint DLP actually blocking it. Now, to kind of level set, right, these policies have already been implemented, right? So the key component is it's not like things just happen without policies. It allows you as an organization to put the appropriate policies in place based on your needs and requirements, right? Same thing as it pertains to labels. Putting the appropriate labels in place to allow you to really classify your data. Now, Microsoft Purview itself has a lot more other solutions, including things like insider risk management for detecting internal risk within the organization as one component. There's other layers of compliance score too. There's sensitive information types, right? So it really helps you really identify and know your data, classify your data, protect that data, prevent that data loss, and then govern your data. So it's a full set of end-to-end solution to protect that data layer. So I want to show you a couple of those demos in the data pillar so we can actually see it and see it as it's occurring. So in this example, Alan has a document here, right? And it's a highly confidential document, and Alan notices that it actually has a public label associated. So here, Alan is actually going to sensitivity labels and says, "Oh, this is I want to mark it with a higher label." So they apply a confidential finance label. After looking at it and seeing that there's a watermark, now they discover, okay, this is maybe not necessarily a finance document, but it's actually highly confidential. So you see what happens is because they upgraded the label initially, they didn't get a prompt for justification because you're making it more sensitive. Now, once you're downgrading that label back down, you got a requirement from that organization requires a business justification. Why this is important, because we get asked this all the time as far as like labels and downgrading labels and what happens because a couple of the things that happen is you kind of apply different capabilities to label these content, and you want to have a way for you to at least audit when these labels and these downgrades occur. Now, these labels were created with different types of protection, including adding things like watermarks, adding headers, footers, also applying encryption and permissioning, right? It's really, really important because the permissions really depend on what access a user will have on that particular file when it has that label. So I, as a user, can have, say, view-only rights on that label, on a file with that label, whereas somebody else can have owner rights. And these labels also, you'll see shortly how they play a role in data loss prevention, right? Because you can create a data loss prevention policy based on a specific label, and then you apply other logic like with endpoint DLP to make sure that content with specific label doesn't leave the organization, is not copied to another cloud app, right? So they're very, very critical which label you actually apply. So all of this, obviously, you can define as an organization. You can create them based on your needs and requirements, and we work with different legal teams and different IT teams to really develop these labels to meet your organization, because it's never kind of a one size kind of fits all scenario. You want to make it adapt to your environment. So in our next example, we're going to show you kind of a scenario to talk about with data loss prevention. In this case, Alan decides, okay, I'm going to try to upload some of these highly confidential files that maybe I shouldn't be doing, but I'm going to try to upload them to my box.com account so I can go home later and view these, files. Now, as they attempt to do that, you see that endpoint DLP comes in and actually blocks that from occurring, right? So Alan then says, okay, I tried all the files. I'm just going to try one file. What's going to happen, right? Purview came in again and says, sorry, this action is not allowed. You're not able to upload this file, right? So at this point, Alan's like, okay, let me try something else. Let me maybe go to the folder. Let me, try to drag these files as an example. Or let me select the entire folder and see if I could do it that way, right? Each time they attempt to do that, they get blocked by endpoint DLP. Says, sorry, you're not able to do that. Now, the reason that obviously this happened is because as an organization, we actually had endpoint DLP policy configured to restrict this specific domain, in this case, box.com. And we mentioned that if it has a specific, sensitivity label to prevent this capability from occurring and being blocked. Now, you can have different policies. You can block with override to allow users to override, and you can allow and block specific domains. So it's very important to understand that this is very customizable based on your needs and requirements, but this example really shows you how endpoint DLP kind of stopped that data from leaving the organization based on it having that particular label. So this is obviously one use case for it. There's tons of other definitely use cases that can be applied, but just wanted to really articulate how endpoint DLP is kind of coming in. Now, in our next demo, I'm actually going to show you another capability, right? Let's say you don't want to block. Let's say, you block that app. You also want to prevent, say, users from printing this file. So as you can see here, we have another file, and this file, again, is highly confidential. It has that label associated. Now, this label can also possibly be applied through auto labeling capabilities, but in either case, it had the appropriate label associated. And the user Alan here decides, okay, I'm going to try to print this content, right? So as you can see that as they attempted to print it, it looks like it's working, right? They're trying to create a PDF called new PDF. And as they attempt to do that, and as they click the print and try to save, they get a message from data loss prevention saying that this action is not allowed. Why this is important? Because now endpoint DLP prevented you from printing that content. Now, other obviously use cases involve, say, copying and pasting that content. If you attempt to do that, obviously that would also be blocked. You can prevent things like copying and pasting through remote desktop. So this is something that many of organizations have really asked us, how do I kind of apply DLP at the endpoint layer, right? Because it's one thing to apply it on the service level, meaning if, the user, Alan, let's say, tries to take that file and copy it to an email and send it out, right? So in this in this demo, we don't show you kind of how that works in, but similar concept. I could just quickly break it down. Essentially, if I took this same highly confidential file, attach it to an email and try to send it out, I would get a policy tip stating that this is not allowed, and it would restrict me from sending that highly confidential file to the organization. Now, what's important to note with sensitivity labels is although I have protection on the file by applying the label, so even had that file left my organization and somebody tried to open that file, that label is still attached to the metadata on that file. So technically speaking, the user who received that file with that label still would not be able to open it, including Alan, who if you try to open it with his personal account, would be disallowed because I have the appropriate encryption and permissions on that file. But the way that I like to think is don't just, applying that defense in depth, making sure you combine the information protection with DLP kind of really brings that power, because you're really applying that defense in depth concept, right? You're protecting it at both ends. In case it leaves, in case it leaks out, at least I have protection. But don't just assume I protected the file. I don't have to have policies to prevent the data from leaving the organization. So it's really important for them to kind of come together. And here, I wanted to kind of show you the Activity Explorer. So from an admin side, we get asked, well, how do I audit this capability? How do I see when, users are actually, doing their protecting the data? Is my DLP policies, working as expected? What's happening? I want to really analyze that. This graph here and the logs really kind of show you all the different activities. And this is obtained through Microsoft Purview, through the Activity Explorer. You're able to actually identify what's occurring and how labels are being used, right? So adoption of labels is absolutely important, because there is ways from an administrative perspective to add like auto labeling, right? Applying a default label to a SharePoint library. So those capabilities are available, but you also want to see when actual end users are applying the labels. Are they using it correctly? Are they applying it? Are they not applying it? Is there a particular user that's using it more than others, right? So you really want to analyze that through the Activity Explorer. You want to see where the DLP policy is applying, like which particular DLP policy is triggering, right? Maybe there's a problem with the DLP policy. Maybe it's too aggressive or not aggressive enough, as an example. You want to see if somebody's, attempting to copy files to clipboard, or they're trying to copy it to a cloud location. Like maybe you see a user saying, okay, why is this user constantly trying to copy files to a cloud location? So it really brings in those capabilities. Now, in addition, and we kind of touched on it, like insider risk management also available, which analyzes the different activities that users are doing inside the organization. Now, risk is something that you can't assume, and kind of thinking in zero trust, verify everything explicitly. Don't assume just because it's internal, just because it's on an internal device, that everything is safe, or I have a firewall. You always want to, explicitly verify that and allow that activity based on that requirement. That's where reviewing all of these components really brings that power in, because you're able to identify and understand that. So this is where kind of Activity Explorer will give you all of those deep insights and really show the effectiveness of your Purview policies. Now, we don't have it in our demo, but also there's additional capabilities for governing your data. I talked about, we talked about how to, know your data, right? We classify and protect that data using information protection. We talked about preventing data loss. The DLP, we also have capabilities to govern our data, right? So in Purview, we have a capability to do retention and data lifecycle management to really control how long that data lives in our organization across our different apps, and when you want to actually remove that content, right? And apply that appropriate retention labels, and also use e-discovery and performing e-discovery legal holds against that data. So all those capabilities are available within the Microsoft Purview stack of products to really help you really protect and really control your data, and in that zero trust model of protecting your data in the data pillar. So really kind of identify the key components as part of our demos for the data pillar. So now we're going to kind of head into our second pillar, which is protecting our apps. And we'll be talking about how we're going to use the power of Defender for Cloud Apps in our demos, and how we're going to apply that concept along with Defender for Endpoint and the web content filtering to protect those apps, right? One of the things we get asked quite a lot as a partner with customers is, I have all of these apps. How do I know and identify what apps my users are using, right? I don't really know, right? It's one thing to say, okay, what apps do we need to protect, right? But the first question I ask is, well, how do you know what apps they are, right? Because if you don't know the apps, right, you can't really protect them, and you can't apply like anomaly protection, or you don't know, okay, what do we sanction? What do we unsanction? What are your users using, right? We don't have all of those insights. So I'm going to show you some examples here of how to apply and how to use Defender for Cloud Apps to really get that data, really identify all those different apps, right? In our first demo, I'm going to kind of show you like how a Defender for Cloud Apps identified specific apps. And using the power of Defender for Cloud Apps, I was able to unsanction a specific app and what happens on the end user end when that app becomes unsanctioned in real time, right? Now, also Defender for Cloud Apps, I'm also going to show you like an app discovery policy. So along with reviewing those apps and unsanctioning and sanctioning them, now there's also different policies that can be applied in Defender for Cloud Apps to protect those cloud apps. So it's looking for other types of anomalies, and in this case, it's looking at a specific cloud app which it identified had a lot of usage, right? So the daily traffic in my example exceeded, say, 500 megs, right? So there was more up, or you can control whether you want upload traffic, download traffic, right? Look at that anomaly behavior. And if you see that, mark that app as monitored, because you as an organization want to know, okay, if the particular app is being used really heavily, I want to have some layer of control and protection against that app. So we'll kind of see what that kind of looks like in an example. And also we'll look at like an overview of the Cloud App Discovery. We get asked this quite a lot, like, how does the Cloud Apps Discovery identify the apps? What apps does it detect, right? There's a set of and this is over expanding 31,000 plus cloud and SaaS application that's able to identify, discover, really break down all of those apps for you, tell you the different certifications the different apps have, and it gives you the control to basically sanction or unsanction that app. And once you apply that, obviously, then you kind of see what happens with that. So we'll kind of get into that. So in our first demo, we have a user, we're going to kind of talk about these set of unsanctioned apps. So here I have a list of apps that I went ahead and unsanctioned. I did the Cloud App Discovery. I found that these apps, I don't want them used in my environment. So I went ahead and proactively unsanctioned these apps so they're no longer used in my organization. So next, we'll see what happens when a user attempts to, say, navigate to one of those sites. Now, in combining the power of Defender for Cloud Apps with Defender for Endpoint, I was able to block those apps. So user Alan says, okay, I'm going to try to, navigate to these apps. And I want to see what's going to happen. So they go to, say, they go to Google Gemini and they say, okay, I'm going to start navigating to that app. And they get a message that this website is blocked by the organization. They say, okay, now let me try chatgpt.com and say, okay, this is also blocked, right? So now they see that they get this message saying the organization unsanctioned this app and it's been blocked. So the user who's protected by Defender for Endpoint, network protection kicked in and blocked this app from running in the environment. Now, next, the user says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and navigate to adobe.com, right? I need to get to my Adobe Cloud and I need to maybe use my storage and other components. So IT department discovered this, right? They got an alert or they reviewed their Cloud App Discovery and saw, hey, we don't allow adobe.com. We don't want to allow it anymore. So then they went ahead and unsanctioned that app. And the next time Alan navigated to that app, they got blocked because the Cloud App, as part of the discovery, they identified that and they unsanctioned it, and then it got blocked in the organization. So now moving forward, Alan is no longer able to navigate to that app. So you're really protecting the app layer, right? Using the power of Defender for Cloud Apps to protect these applications. So you don't have users using these apps and, copying the content. Now we saw earlier, like in the case of Box.com, right? We protected we didn't block the app as an example, but we prevented you from uploading a specific file with a label to that application. So there's different ways of attacking it, whether you want to block the app or you want to allow the app but prevent corporate and confidential data from being uploaded to those particular apps. So there's, obviously different ways to kind of go at it. So here we, again, we reviewed the app. Now, I talked about the components of policies, right? So here we have an app, and I talked about this earlier for, where a specific cloud app, as an example, exceeded the threshold I have set in the policy for over 500 megs. Now, in this case, the Defender for Cloud Apps discovered, hey, there's a new high volume app that was discovered because it was more than 500 megabytes of traffic. Now, in this example, right, it was Office Online. So there was a lot of uploads, right, or a lot of downloads, a lot of traffic occurring. Now, in this example, right, we have Office Online, but this can obviously apply to any other cloud application, right? And any other app, and you can apply the different thresholds, right? Now, Office Online, maybe you're going to have more traffic, and different organizations will probably have higher thresholds, right? And you can have different governance actions against those apps. But this is obviously just kind of an example to show you kind of the art of the possible, right? So what happened here is it identified this as a high volume app, and part of my governance actions, it's stated to mark the app as monitored. So what happened is when you mark the app as monitored, the system will then apply a warning. When the users moving forward navigate to this app, they'll get warned that this app is not allowed. Now, as IT, you can go in and analyze this and say, oh, I never unsanctioned or sanctioned this app, so it's kind of like in a neutral state. We do allow this app, so I'm going to mark it as sanctioned. So moving forward, once you do that, that warning will go away and the user is able to safely navigate that app. Obviously, in the data and the data that it returns to you, it's able to tell you that this app is sanctioned, and it won't, moving forward, it won't apply specific policies, because at least it knows that, hey, you as an organization marked this app as sanctioned. So I'm not going to tell you that, hey, now, if it still detects any sort of random anomaly against that app, it's still going to identify that. And you can have different policies in Defender for Cloud Apps. You can also look at other anomalies, file level anomalies, right? Using Defender for Cloud Apps, as it looks at the different files, and it looks at like suspicious activity in your cloud apps. Now, your cloud apps include Microsoft 365, right? So things like if, say, a user's account is breached and they set a forwarder, right? As an example, it's suspicious, they're forwarding to a personal email. This is something that the user's never set up before. It'll detect that and it'll send you an alert saying, hey, forwarding was created on this mailbox. And then you go in and identify, is this legitimate? Is the user possibly being breached, right? So it's important for Defender for Cloud Apps to provide you that anomaly. And there's other anomalies as well that you can discover against what the different policies. These are obviously just kind of some of those examples here. Now here, I talked a lot about cloud discovery. This is one of my favorite features and the best starting point for Defender for Cloud Apps is the cloud discovery capability. So, and we'll talk about shortly how to kind of get all of this data in here to perform this discovery. But here we have our cloud discovery, which really went through and identified all the different cloud apps that is used in my environment. It identified by, and we'll see here, the different options and navigation capabilities you have within that cloud discovery to basically show you all the different apps. You'll see the different app categories. You're going to see all the discovered apps. You can see what entities or what users are using and who's using the most traffic at cloud, all these cloud apps. Where are the headquarters for these apps, which are risky, how much traffic is occurring across those cloud apps. Really breaks it down pretty heavily, right? All the different IPs that connected, the users that connected, devices, the amount of traffic. And this is across, for my organization, across the last 30 days, right? So depending on the organization size, you might want to have a different breakdown. You see all the apps categorized beautifully in a table, so you can identify and really apply that protection, right? You can see all the different IPs that connected from, how much traffic, how much download, how many transactions, when they were last seen, right? Who the users are that are using these apps, right? What devices are they coming from, right? So it's very important for cloud apps to really show you all of that data, right? Because again, if you don't see this data, if you don't have visibility into all of this content, how would you as an organization know which apps are risky? Where do I have risks? Which cloud apps do I have to protect, right? So this is where you start with that cloud discovery first to really understand all of these cloud apps. And, Lai talked about earlier, Shadow IT, really kind of understand your users' usage, right? You might have apps that you're expecting to see, and you might have apps that you weren't expecting to see. So it's very important. Now, in this example, right, I have Defender for Endpoint seamlessly connected with Defender for Cloud Apps. So all of the logs and all of that traffic that's captured as part of Defender for Endpoint was routed to Defender for Cloud Apps and gave me all this data seamlessly without, and this is, always being updated, right? All this data is constantly being fed through Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Endpoint into Defender for Cloud Apps. Now, for customers who are potentially not using Defender for Endpoint currently, who are not using Defender for Endpoint currently, if you actually wanted to bring in, say, your firewall logs or from other, web proxies, there's different ways to connect those network appliances into Defender for Cloud Apps to still get some of this data. Now, this also brings up a point for customers who are looking, who maybe are, if you're using a different endpoint detection and response product, if you're not currently on Defender for Endpoint, and you wanted to evaluate Defender for Endpoint, or you want to get this data from Defender for Cloud Apps, there's a great way for you to put the Defender for Endpoint in a passive mode, right? Get the in passive mode and get all of these data, get the analysis, understand what you have, and pull all of it and get all the different alerting you're going to get from Defender for Endpoint and pass this traffic to Defender for Cloud Apps. Now, in passive mode, there's no active protection, but at least you're able to use the different components of Defender for Endpoint, get the vulnerability management, and also feed this data into Defender for Cloud Apps. So at least you can do a discovery of all your cloud apps. And then in addition, there's additional policies that we don't have it in this demo, but there's also ways to apply conditional app control. So you can apply customized conditional access. And we talked in our previous webinar about, how to apply that at the identity level, applying conditional access. You can apply it on different app levels. So if a user accesses a specific app, a specific cloud app, you can apply session controls on that app, require more stringent authentication strengths. If you have, say, a finance app as an example, and you require that they use a passkey when they connect to that cloud app, and apply more customized like session controls, or apply customized DLP policies to those cloud apps. There's endless opportunity when it comes to using, all of these products, and you bring them all together. You can have that component. So Defender for Cloud Apps really brings and kind of shines that light on that technology. Now, there's also obviously using Defender for Office, right, with safe link, safe attachments, where a user gets a link and they click on that link and they get blocked. So that's how, using a Power Defender for Office, right, and safe link, safe attachments if there's unknown malware. So really protect that, again, at the app level, protecting that Microsoft 365 app level, right, and anti-phishing components that come with Defender for Office. You can also use things like Intune and MAM, which is mobile application management, to protect and manage the apps on user devices. So this is another component of Intune as part of the endpoint management, where you might not want to manage that endpoint, right? But you want to manage the app and kind of protect that app, right? So that's where using a component of mobile application management to be able to apply specific policies, so that, let's say, user installs the Outlook app, connects their company account to it, you want to prevent them from copying and pasting content from the Outlook app into their Notes app on their phone, or preventing them from copying any items or uploading content from their phone into the managed app, right? So you can apply that protection on the app level without necessarily managing that device. So that's all part of the app level, right? And that's not part of Defender for Cloud Apps. That's a component of Intune and device management, which we kind of talked about in our previous webinar. But really, where the app level and protection of the app comes in is using Intune, the application management, to manage and control that app. And if you ever want to remove data from that app, even though you don't control the phone, you can apply a wipe and actually remove corporate data from that mobile phone without necessarily, wiping anything else on the phone, because that's all you would really control is that app. So that's one use case, obviously, of that. And, you can also apply MDM for managing the device, but that's more device management on the mobile device if you want to control settings and things like that. So this kind of concludes the apps layer. So I hope this is able to really paint that picture on how to kind of protect that apps. Now, we want to show you kind of how all this comes together, right? You're going to ask, right, okay, I applied the protection at identity, I applied it at endpoints, I applied it at the data and apps. How did this all come together with Defender XDR? How did it identify all of these different risks and all of these different alerts and put it all together? So here we have a multi-staged incident that Defender XDR put together. So it looked at all of these signals across all of the pillars, right? So we see the attack story, right? We see the, a full attack story as it's breaking down all the different alerts. So you see suspicious activity, right? You see DLP policy applied. Okay, this something's happening here. The user's trying to copy files or copy and paste. They try to access from a Tor browser, right? Or a risky IP. So they're trying a lot of different things like that. That's occurring in the environment. And the malware was prevented. The user tried to run malware, and that got prevented by Defender for Endpoint. Then they try to access an unsanctioned app, right? They try to access an app that wasn't allowed by the organization, right? So the attack story really kind of paints that picture. And then here we have all of the different alerts that generated, and then you can review that. Here's all the, kind of going back to the attack story here. So you see how it really kind of brought all of those different signals really together. And then you're able to, after you see the attack story, you see all the different signals across all of the different alerts, then you're able to kind of go into each individual alert and identify that alert. And this is how applying all of these technologies together, concept of automatic attack disruption comes in, because it's able to apply that protection because it sees all of these signals, right? Without it knowing all of these signals and having all of this insight, it doesn't really know an attack, but knowing and having all of these signals really brings the power of Defender XDR to be able to identify all of these alerts, bring them all together, and really kind of show you all of that here. And you can look at all the assets that were impacted with the different users, the mailbox, what cloud apps were identified as possible risky, right? Look at the investigation, where actions actually happened, remediated, where are the files, what URLs were connected, what processes were run. So it's really deep, right? Looking at a multi-stage real world scenario of a bad actor trying to perform like these are common things that bad actors will attempt to do. Now, if this is an insider doing it, then obviously you might have other concerns, but a bad actor generally will apply these types of suspicious behavior. And this is where Defender XDR brings it all together, brings all those different alerts. And then obviously, when you have the different protection across all those pillars, this all kind of comes together, right? Had we blocked only the identity, had we not blocked endpoints, had I not had Defender for Endpoint to block that malware, had I not had a DLP policy to prevent data from leaving the organization, had I not unsanctioned an app, user could get to the app, right? So you see how applying protection on all layers is very, very important. Not just saying, oh, we have Defender antivirus, we protect the endpoints. That's not enough in today's world, right? We applied conditional access, we required MFA. Well, that's not enough, because what happens if you don't protect your data and MFA gets breached? Somebody, let's say, approved the MFA request and they got in and now they have your data. Okay, how do I prevent the data from leaving the organization? Or how do I prevent them from accessing this cloud app? All that comes together with Defender XDR and by applying all those protection across those layers. So really, I wanted to articulate and kind of show you that multi-staged attack simulation and where Defender XDR kind of protected you at all the layers. So appreciate, I hope this was insightful for everybody and kind of really showed you how we apply the zero trust model across all the pillars. It's very important. If you haven't started that journey on zero trust, it's very important. Identify, look at all the pillars and really apply the sets of technologies to protect you at all layers. And, you start off on your, zero trust journey. So I appreciate you all being here, and I'm going to pass it back to Lai, who will provide you a customer story along with, kind of next steps and Q&A as we move ahead. So I really appreciate your time and being here with us today. And Lai, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Yasai, for the demonstrations. A lot of good insights on all the different attack vectors and the different pillars of zero trust. So much appreciate the demos. So kind of just jumping into the final thoughts as well as our customer story. So I want to reiterate once again from what Yasai said that essentially cyber attacks can emerge at any time and from various different vectors. And by implementing individual point solutions, that's probably not going to be enough, right? We have to really consider a multi-layered security strategy to prevent, detect, and respond to a wide range of security threats. A comprehensive approach really ensures that your data, your systems, and your users are fully protected. With the cyber threats constantly evolving, especially with artificial intelligence being so prevalent in modern technology, we're seeing a lot more and more AI-driven attacks. For example, we're seeing ransomware as a service where attackers are renting tools and executing attacks, making it, very accessible to those that have minimal technical skill sets. And so, the current modern day, attack landscape, right, is constantly evolving, and we really have to consider all the different angles, all the different approaches to really protect our organizations against these cyber attacks. Right. With that, I'd like to also discuss about a customer story that essentially shares the components that we discussed and shares how we help them implement all the different components to really provide them with a full holistic security and comprehensive security environment. So for this for this customer story, we went through and performed a security assessment of their environment and identified all the potential security risks and vulnerabilities. From there, we targeted the first pillar, which is identity, right? And what we did was we revamped their conditional access policies. We enabled critical policies that improve their security posture. In addition, one of the key things we did was we enabled Entry ID protection and the user and sign-on risk policies. From there, we also enabled Entry ID workbooks to analyze the conditional access policies that were created in report-only mode and really test those policies before we rolled it out into production. Moving on from the identity pillar, we went over to devices, and we enabled Defender for Endpoint, implementing the necessary endpoint security baselines for their Windows devices, making sure that their Windows devices were enrolled and secured to provide them with that endpoint layer protection. From there, we transitioned and implemented Defender for Office, and we implemented safe links, safe attachments. We also protected their domains and made sure that their domains were authorized, their email domains were authorized for sending and receiving. Right, that provided that additional layer of protecting against malicious attachments, malicious links, to prevent that phishing attacks from happening. And then from there, we also enabled Defender for Cloud Apps to really identify all the different applications that potentially they were leveraging within their shadow IT that they were not aware of. Right. Lastly, from utilizing all those Defender components as well as the Entry ID component, we then enabled automatic attack disruption within their environment. And why automatic attack disruption is important and significant is that the signals from all the different Defender components flow into Defender XDR. And with automatic attack disruption, it's able to pick up all those different signals, analyze those signals using machine learning, and really use that to prevent or limit potential attacks from spreading, right? And really making sure that it reduces the overall impact within the organization, right? There's so much that you can do to really protect your environment and protect and prevent those attacks from happening. But in the event that something does leak through, how do you make sure that you don't, that attack doesn't spread throughout the entire environment and it's only isolated to a certain amount of devices or potentially users? And with automatic attack disruption, that has the capability to really analyze all the different signals to pinpoint where the attack is happening and really hone in and isolate that user, that device, or that system from spreading onto the rest of the environment. Right. And with that, I'd like to jump into the next item here, which is how do we help you organizations drive to that zero trust framework and zero trust security posture? So definitely this is the area where we can help and provide organizations with a comprehensive security assessment across all the 4 major pillars as we discussed. From there, after going through assessment, we can itemize and prioritize and look at a custom list of recommendations for your organization. We provide organizations with a roadmap of zero trust, a do now, do next, do later approach where we lay out all the different recommendations for the organizations to immediately implement, as well as implement in the future as they grow and expand within their cloud journey. And then there's definitely also programs and incentives that we can work with your Microsoft reps to identify to really help supplement some of these implementations and deployments for your organization. So feel free to reach out to us, and we can definitely see what we can do to help you guys and help your organization in your cloud journey. With that, Shane, I'd like to pass it to you to bring up any questions that we may have from the audience.
Yeah, so we got 3 main ones here. We have, is there a way to prevent labels from being downgraded? And then they give us an example. For example, if the file has sensitive data that requires the file to remain labeled with a higher label. A lot of labeling going on there. What's this all about, guys?
Sure, that's a great question. So there are different ways to kind of approach that. So I'll kind of start off with stating there is no direct setting that will prevent a label downgrade, like in a policy where you can specify a setting that will say like prevent downgrading a label. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't prevent that activity. So there's different ways to be proactive about preventing downgrade. So one of them is making sure that when the labels are created, only the appropriate people have the permission on the label to actually modify it. So what I mean by that is if a file has a specific label, only allow specific users to be able to have the permissions to even change the label on that. So that's one way, obviously. Another obviously way is applying different auto labeling technologies and capabilities to automatically label content so that it has the appropriate label for the organization. There's also a way to make sure that business justification is provided when label downgrades do occur. Although it doesn't prevent it, at least it does require business justification. That at least allows for you to audit who's actually downgrading these labels so you can monitor and see what's going on, right? So the best way is to really design your labels in a way where you don't apply, you permission it correctly to prevent the user from downgrade. Now, in the future, that might be something that might come in the policy, but currently there's no native policy for that. But there are legitimate use cases where something might inadvertently be labeled. So you want to have some sort of protection to know that somebody can actually go in. Because if it provides you no option to downgrade a label, then obviously I think that would be a larger issue. But there are ways to be kind of proactive to prevent these by permissioning labels correctly and using the powers of auto labeling, default labels on document libraries to kind of prevent this activity.
That's great, Isai. Another one here, the demos show proactive protection on the environment. How or can Microsoft Security Solutions remediate an environment after the attack?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So obviously, you want to really, before kind of taking a step back, you want to really, if you are using the Defender suite of products, right? You want to make sure before you please analyze to make sure that you have that proper protection, make sure that cloud protection, real-time protection, network protection, all those capabilities are actually properly implemented to make sure that that type of event doesn't occur. Now, to be kind of, if it does occur, Microsoft Defender is not necessarily kind of a recovery tool to help you necessarily recover, say, from a ransomware attack, but it'll give you all the different alerts that obviously it generated and allow you to do things like containing that device to prevent the spread. That's very, very important. In our previous demo, I showed you like device containment, user containment. You can immediately contain that device. What that happens is it stops all network activity on that device and only allows communication with Defender for Endpoint. The minute you do that, then you can run more advanced hunting and queries in the organization to see if this malware exists on any other device. If you don't find it and you don't find an alert or malware on the device, at least you can isolate that to that individual device and really apply that protection. So although it's not necessarily providing you that protection that could clean it up, but at least you have all the different tools with advanced hunting, with device containment, to really identify, is there a bigger problem? And hopefully it's only that single device and you're able to isolate that, identify it, and fix that, resolve that issue, and possibly quarantine that file or malware on that device before you allow network access on that device. So I'd also use that as an opportunity to really look at your policies, look at the different protection, your endpoint security policies, and why the protection didn't apply. Maybe something is not configured correctly to apply that, and really kind of go back and look at that. Maybe look at automatic attack, like look at attack surface reduction rules and endpoint security, apply those so you prevent that. If it was a macro that run, maybe you don't have a policy for that. So really apply those in person. So that's kind of how you do it post an event from happening. Really use the Defender XDR, the incidents and alerts. And then moving forward, you apply like a playbook, right? Like an automated playbook or a Power Automate app to kind of automatically say, do device containment when this alert comes in. So if there is an alert detected for malware, automatically applied something like a device containment, right? So along with like automatic attack disruption, which can do it for you once it analyzes all these signals. But that's how I would, that's how you would approach, like in a post breach, if protection didn't apply, what you would do to kind of minimize that spread and really bring the organization back to a protected state. So,
okay. Speaking of XDR, so and the alerting there. Here's a question regarding like cloud and on-prem. So it gives you the alerts for Microsoft's cloud services, but is there a way for it or Microsoft solutions to ingest data from on-premises applications?
You definitely can. So there's couple ways on that. So one of them obviously is Defender for Identity. If you have on-premise domain controllers, you can apply different identity sensors on those domain controllers to understand that activity occurring in the environment, right? Against your sign-on activity, if there's like past the hash, or if there's something occurring on-prem. If you're a customer who has domain controls on-prem, using the power of Defender for Identity and bring that logging into Defender XDR, and you can do things like user containment once you analyze certain risks that are occurring. So not all the threats can be occurring in the cloud. Could be happening on-prem, and if you have domain joined machines, if you're not yet on Entra ID joined, users are logging in there, or there's activity occurring in your Active Directory, you can analyze that. You can also use the power of Microsoft Sentinel, which is a full SIEM solution, Microsoft SIEM solution, to bring all different data connectors from not only your cloud products, your cloud apps, Defender XDR, Entra ID, all that. You can also bring in from other applications, your firewall logs, bring that all into Microsoft Sentinel and create the different workbooks, create the different analytics rules, looking for all these anomalies, all coming together, and then apply playbooks and all that using Microsoft Sentinel, which is the SIEM solution as part of Microsoft security solution. So we didn't kind of talk heavily on Sentinel because that's its own conversation, but using those components of Defender for Identity and Sentinel, you can apply those protections for on-prem as well.
All right. So here's one that's been on everybody's mind because it's definitely part of my workflow. I take this one personally. ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, we know a lot of users are using it. Is there a way to block its usage from being used on corporate data, but not necessarily block the entire URL?
That's a great question. So yeah, obviously we saw how we can unsanction that app to prevent the app from running. Now, if you don't want to do that and you want to protect, that's where you apply like endpoint DLP, right? you can restrict that specific domain, ChatGPT as an example, and then apply endpoint DLP policies to prevent specific device actions, right? So applying endpoint DLP, so that if there is any sort of upload capability, if they attempt to upload a file that has a specific label associated, you can prevent that from happening. Purview DLP and with different browsers, you can apply different extensions to prevent that. So that's obviously one way to do that. You can also, with endpoint DLP, prevent like copy and paste, so people can't copy content if they don't want to take the whole file, but they want to take contents of that file, copy and paste it into ChatGPT. You can use endpoint DLP to prevent copy to clipboard on that file because it has a specific sensitivity labels. Now, if they can't copy it, then they can't obviously paste it into ChatGPT from that sensitive file. So that's two ways, obviously, you can kind of approach it. One obviously is, like I said, with endpoint DLP, and then obviously outright blocking the app if you choose to unsanction or sanction that app, right? You can also apply different anomaly and detections across those apps too, using Defender for Cloud Apps, but those would be the two main ways using the app domains in endpoint DLP and preventing device actions like copy and paste, print, and all that to prevent people from copying and pasting content in, say, ChatGPT as an example.
Awesome. All right. Please don't block my access to ChatGPT. Okay, cool. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate your time. We will be doing more of these webinar sessions in the future. I think our next plan of attack is around Intune specifically. So we will be sending out some information there. We will also be sending out the recording